Well, good evening, little masters, and welcome to episode 272 of the Prancing Pony podcast, where we are dying to find out what's behind door number one.
And I don't think it's a new car, Baldur. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I am Don Marshall, the obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, and I am here with the man of the West, who has often found himself crawling like a beast on the ground, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Don. It's what you do when you're pursued by a groping horror. Have you ever been pursued by a groping horror?
Only in my nightmares.
Or your best dreams, depending on the...
You should see a therapist about that, Alan. Not gonna lie.
By the way, I'm thinking if it's not a new car, what's behind door number one is probably a year's supply of rice-a-roni.
That's so much
Worst
rice.
consolation prize ever, man.
Ew, gross.
All right. Well, folks, Aragorn leads the way tonight into one of the spookiest places in all of Middle-earth, in the fourth and last part of The Passing of the Grey Company, the second chapter in The Return of the King.
Yeah, he may want to bring a flashlight, folks. Some of you people are hearing this show for the first time. To you, we bid a warm welcome. Here at the Prancing Pony podcast, we are reading, talking, and often joking our way through Middle-earth a few pages at a time.
We take a deep dive into the lore. We explore how the story came to be, talk about our favorite themes, and a whole lot more.
But in a more lighthearted and fun way. In this case, think of it like friends or a weird father-son duo chatting at a pub. And we're glad that you've joined us.
And I'm glad you're finally old enough to join me at the pub, son. I'm sure you'll be glad you joined us as well, folks. But before we get to tonight's chapter discussion, it's time to check in with Frodo and Sam, as well as Pippin and Gandalf, in another Meanwhile Elsewhere in Middle-earth.
Well, today in the book is March 8th, and it's been March 8th really only for a few hours now, as we've spent the better part of the last two episodes riding through Rohan in the dark of night and the early morning. It has been a remarkably busy day for our heroes Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, as well as Merry, Theoden, and Éomer, plus the 30 men that I assume have been riding for the last week from Rivendell to Rohan.
At least a week. Did you do the math on that, Don?
It's a very rough guess, Alan, but given my namesake of obscure Lord of the Rings facts guy, I did decide to pepper in this little intro portion of the podcast with a few fun, obscure Lord of the Rings facts here and there, so get ready.
All right, man, I am ready. Throw me some cool, obscure facts. I'm ready for them.
Here's how I figured this out, right?
All right.
Gandalf is in Rohan asking for Shadowfax in Fellowship of the Ring, right? You remember back in the first book about 5 decades ago when you started this podcast?
It feels like that, yeah.
Well, he is there on September 23rd in the Third Age, year 3018, right?
Right.
But 6 days later, he is then in the Shire talking to Sam's dad, asking where Frodo went. Now, I'm guessing 30 trained men on horseback, even though they're not riding the Lord of all horses, will make that journey in just about a week.
That's probably fair. Maybe 8 to 10 days at most. I think you're probably close to it. Gandalf would have been riding with all speed. You could argue Rivendell's a little closer, but I actually don't know if it is, because Gandalf would have taken that way up through Holland and up past the Grey Flood.
He most certainly would have. But to give you a time frame and a reference, it takes the Fellowship traveling by foot during the day just about 2 weeks to get from Rivendell to the Mines of Moria by foot. Yeah. So we've got some time here on our hands, and horseback significantly faster.
Oh, it sure does.
Yeah. But, of course, it's been a very busy day for all of the other heroes across Middle-earth as well. Pippin is stuck on Shadowfax riding through Minas Tirith on Gandalf. Frodo, Sam, and Gollum are heading south to Mordor as they say their farewells to Faramir. True. And Faramir is off to Gondor to, I assume, disappoint his father.
Yeah, I suspect that's probably exactly what he's doing. And yet another parallel, really, in a stunning father-son comparison.
Wow. The hits start coming and they don't stop coming.
Do you have a brother? Do you have an older brother who's a little stronger than you are?
You know what? I don't, but I'm sure if I did, there would be a way to weasel that in there. But
I'm sure there would be.
Wow. Okay. All right. So
trying to make up for all the old jokes last week.
Well, there were quite a few.
There were.
I would apologize for them, but they were all really funny. So I won't.
No, that's fair. All right.
All right, so Pippin and Gandalf, whom we saw last chapter, arrive in Minas Tirith. At this point, they are still on the road, and we don't get much about the journey to Minas Tirith, especially in the first few days. Only this. There had been the first ride at terrible speed without halt. And then in the dawn, he had seen a pale gleam of gold, and they had come to the silent town and the great empty house on the hill. And before we go any further with that, I do want to say, when you and Corey spent like 15 minutes of that part of the podcast talking about the fact that, yeah, Pippin has no idea where they are. He's never been anywhere. Yeah. It's fascinating to see, as you have so often said, Lord of the Rings through the eyes of those who know the least about what is going on.
Yeah, the epistemic regime for the Lord of the Rings is very interesting in that regard.
It's such a fascinating way to take a point of view, because often, we are taken on books through the person that knows the most. And I went back and I reread this portion to try and do the Meanwhile in Middle-earth to see if there's any like little hints there. And wouldn't you know it, it's just a moment of, oh, yeah, we're just here in this place, and I have no idea what it is. Yeah. I've never been here before. And it actually harkens back to the point when Mary asks, all right, where are we going? Because I don't know where we're going either.
No, which is funny he asks, because he hasn't been spending his time looking at the maps like Mary has. So you could tell him where you're going. He's about, oh, okay, wherever that is. I mean,
no idea.
All right, whatever.
Absolutely no idea.
But of course, like you said, he didn't know where they were, but we know where they were. The silent town is, of course, Edoras, and the great empty house on the hill, the pale gleam of gold that he saw as well, is, of course, the Hall of Meduseld.
And in Meduseld, we do see Pippin literally being put to sleep in a corner to rest.
Pippin in a corner.
Well, apparently Gandalf does, or maybe he put himself there, I assume.
That's fair.
Gandalf is off talking to men, giving them orders, and the winged shadow comes around again. Yeah. And so Gandalf immediately just starts riding again, and we skip ahead at least 3 days in the journey.
Aside from spending the entire day riding.
Right, which, I imagine as fun as Tolkien might have thought that would have been to write about. He did not. But it is at this point that I am curious how many moments they, stopped for water breaks or to bathroom breaks.
Well, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe they have to do like the Tour de France thing where they just kind of point off the side of the horse and go.
Oh, I know nothing about bike racing.
No, the Tour, they actually will pull over to the side and have a nature break.
Goodness,
but every once in a while, you'll see that happen.
Right. If you're in the last 100 yards, but you got to go.
I think they'll hold it if you're in the last 100 yards. But yeah, I mean, if you're in the last 10K, probably you're just gonna go.
10. Okay. Forgive my ignorance. Do you know how long the Tour de France actually goes?
Oh, it's 3 full weeks and change, and it's something like 3,000 total miles. But
oh my God.
Each stage is anywhere from the shortest stages other than the time trials are usually over 100 miles.
That's the journey to Middle-earth on bike several times over.
Over and over and over. It's
God.
Like the equivalent of doing a marathon and then getting up the next day and doing another marathon and then doing it every day for over 3 weeks.
Good Lord. You know what? Now I've got a question, right?
Yeah.
Bikes are fairly rudimentary when it comes to engineering. Why do bikes not exist in Middle-earth? Surely the dwarves must have had some sort of technological feat or engineering prowess to be like.
That's a very interesting point. Tolkien obviously drew his various, cultures from different time periods. We talk about the Shire being sort of a Victorian era, turn of the century, meaning 1900 or so English setting. But as we travel further and further, it gets further and further back in time. So we get to Bree, and that's more of your late Middle Ages. And you get to Minas Tirith, and it is like ancient Rome or something along those lines. I mean, it seems to get further and further back in time. And of course, bicycles didn't come around until
1817. I just Googled it.
Okay, I'm glad you did. I was going to say the early 1800s, but I wasn't exactly sure when.
Here's my new headcanon. Bikes do exist, but only in the Shire. So absolutely everyone else would consider them children's playthings if they were to see them.
I can see them existing in the Shire. That would be an interesting thing.
Oh,
very small bikes, though.
Oh, very, very small bikes. Of course.
Maybe tricycles.
Ooh. A hobbit on a tricycle.
I'm trying to picture a hobbit on one of those big penny farthing bicycles.
With the little legs. Oh,
man, that'd be great.
Oh, that's brilliant. You know what? Someone somewhere has art of that.
I was going to say. I think
hobbits on bikes. Maybe someone listening has been the one to make it, or they will.
I'm sure they will now. Yeah. Well, that was an interesting digression.
All right. The best ones always are.
So it came from the idea of bathroom breaks. Yeah, I would imagine that Gandalf, when Pippin says, look, I have to go, probably pulls over real quick, gives Shadowfax a quick breather, and then they're off. I don't know.
So,
that's one thing about Tolkien. He doesn't get into that level of nitty gritty.
that's very true. And, probably for the best, because there's really no need to talk about it in the book. But it does make one wonder, because Tolkien has been going into so much detail for so many things. Why not bathroom breaks?
Or pulling over at like a Buc-ee's to get some beef jerky on the journey. I mean, it's perfect road trip food.
I just imagine them riding through the plains and there being like just one guy with a huge caravan knapsack on and be like, would you like to buy some cow meat?
Salted beef.
Oh, all right. Well, I digress.
We do.
Because we have a whole other set of heroes to talk about. Meanwhile, Frodo, Sam, and Gollum are leaving the relative, I don't know if I want to call it safety, but I am.
Relative safety places you can find in that part of the world.
True. Leaving the relative safety of Henneth Anun, the hidden refuge of the Rangers of Ithilien.
That's right. They end up saying their goodbyes to Faramir, and they start making their way closer and closer to Mordor.
Yeah, and I realize that this is not a special, like, philology kind of intro, but a fun fact, again, an obscure Lord of the Rings fact that I did find out. Henneth Anun is called Window of the Sunset, but we get an absolutely wonderful description by Faramir of the land that Frodo and Sam are about to travel in, and I went back and I reread this portion because I love it so much. The land dreams in a false peace, and for a while all evil is withdrawn. Fare you well while you may. And I love that. Just these Faramir, and I know Tolkien kind of considers himself almost a little bit of a Faramir self-insert at certain points. A little bit.
There was a footnote where he said, if any character in the story is me, it's Faramir. But of course, he's also, he says that Faramir is far braver and all these things.
Sure. But, he gives Faramir's these amazing one-liners. I do not love the sword
for
its sharpness.
That whole speech is just brilliant. Yeah.
So good. But then Faramir does something that I think Tolkien does not get enough credit for, but that I love that Tolkien demonstrates throughout the books. He embraced the hobbits then, after the manner of his people, stooping and placing his hands upon their shoulders and kissing their foreheads.
Oh, I love that. Oh, you know what? That just reminds me of something, though. That reminds me of something in the films.
When Boromir
dies.
Yeah.
Aragorn has his hands on Boromir's shoulders and kisses his forehead.
In the manner of their people.
In the manner of his people. I can't believe I never caught that. I mean, I always thought it was a sweet and tender moment, but I never put the two and two together about that being in the manner of his people. That's great. That's a great catch.
One of those little things that you don't notice until you go back. And again, that was one of the points for me that, I've never read this out loud or with another person, but I took some time and I'm like, that's a thing.
That is. There is something about reading it aloud that changes the experience dramatically. You don't miss those tiny little details anymore. There's so many blink and you miss it moments, as we call them. But when you read them aloud, it's hard to miss them.
It really is. Yeah, certainly. It's more brought to the forefront of your mind.
Exactly. So we do learn a little bit later on in the chapter that Frodo, Sam, and Gollum walk nearly 21 miles this day. Tolkien says darkness came early to the silent woods, and before the fall of the night, they halted, weary, for they had walked 7 leagues or more from Henneth Anun. That's quite a journey.
It is quite a journey. When you think about the length of hobbit legs compared to someone else.
That's a good point. That might be more along the lines of a 30-mile walk for you and me.
For them, almost certainly. Certainly. 3 to 3.5 feet tall. That's rough.
Yeah, it is rough.
I also do want to make a very special note. Again, another obscure Lord of the Rings fact. This is not technically in Middle-earth. This is in our world, but I am certain this had a fairly huge impact on Middle-earth. March 8th in the real world is the date that Tolkien gave his famous lecture on fairy stories, first given by the professor in 1939. Since he gave that lecture, it has been published 3 different times, once back in 39, again in 83, and a third time in 2008 with a number of other Tolkien essays.
Oh, that is excellent. Thank you for that, Don.
Oh, happy to do so. And that was Meanwhile in Middle-earth. Back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
So as for March 8th here in this particular timeline, let's go ahead and dive into the text. Don, can you go ahead and pick up where we left off last week?
I certainly can. Aragorn had brought torches from Dunharrow, and now he went ahead, bearing one aloft, and Elladan, with another, went at the rear, and Gimli, stumbling behind, strove to overtake him. He could see nothing but the dim flame of the torches, but if the company halted, there seemed an endless whisper of voices all about him, a murmur of words in no tongue that he had ever heard before. Nothing assailed the company, nor withstood their passage, and yet, steadily, fear grew on the dwarf as he went on, most of all because he knew now that there could be no turning back. All the paths behind were thronged by an unseen host that followed in the dark. So time unreckoned passed, until Gimli saw a sight that he was ever afterwards loath to recall. The road was wide, as far as he could judge, but now the company came suddenly into the great empty space, and there were no longer any walls upon either side. The dread was so heavy on him that he could hardly walk. Away to the left, something glittered in the gloom as Aragorn's torch drew near. Then Aragorn halted and went to look what it might be. "Does he feel no fear?" muttered the dwarf. "In any other cave, Gimli Gloin's son would have been the first to run to the gleam of gold, but not here. Let it lie."
Okay, I'm scared. What about you? I want to turn on the lights.
Terrifying.
Yeah, man, the unseen host thronging behind, and yeah.
You know, we've been hyping this up for so long, and now we're finally here, and I'm literally getting goosebumps as I read,
chills.
Thinking about how terrifying it is.
This is a terrifying place, no doubt about it. Well, let's go back to the beginning of that passage. As anybody knows who's played Dungeons & Dragons, party order is very important. So Aragorn is leading the way. Aragorn, roll your perception. Oh, no, you're kidding me, right? All right. So Aragorn's in front, and he's carrying a torch.
Meanwhile, Elladan is in the back with another, and of course, elf eyes. Definitely going to have a bonus to their perception checks.
I'm sure.
Meanwhile, Gimli struggling to keep up with Elladan.
You know, I have to admit, though, it leads me to ask a pretty simple question. Couldn't they have brought more torches? I mean, there are 35 guys here. You'd think at least a half dozen or so could carry some light in a place like this. I don't know. That's just me. Yeah, I need more. I need more light. This place is terrifying.
Maybe part of the reason why is that you don't want to disturb the dead with too much light. You know, their eyes are very sensitive, Alan. We want to be respectful.
We got to be respectful. That's true. Sorry to wake you guys.
Yeah, we just need you to fight with us for a little bit. Just go scare off some bad guys. But we do continue this portion through Gimli's perspective, and he's not able to see anything but the torches, and those are only very dimly lit.
That's right. But even though he can't see anything, he can certainly hear something, and it is terrifying. It's a nonstop whispering, murmuring all around him. And it's in a language he'd never heard before, so you know it's not Westron. I'm imagining some pre-Numenorian Mannish language of some kind. You know, we do have a few leftover words, right? When we talk about some of the place names in Gondor, we read that it is of a pre-Numenorian origin, and that's all we get.
Yeah, it's very brief, but I've always liked to think of it as, you know, it is a language that they had seemingly before Numenor was even sort of crafted.
Certainly before they were sailing to the coast of Middle-earth.
Absolutely. And while it is true that nothing stopped them physically as they made their way through the passage, it is all too clear, and it is arguably even more terrifying when you realize this, right? That this is a one-way road, right? This unseen host behind him following the company, this sort of looming, ever-present threat.
And growing threat. Not only can you not turn around and go back, you really feel like you can't stop.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they are forcing you now to a destination. And it's a pretty terrifying thing. Now, over a period of time, and we don't know how long it is. In fact, Gimli doesn't even know how long it is, right? This is over a period of time that he cannot actually fathom. So time unreckoned passed. And during that time, they eventually arrive in this big empty space where he senses an overwhelming dread. And it's so intense for him that the memory of this place is something that he doesn't even want to think about afterwards. Don, do you ever have a moment like that? Is there a place where you don't even want to think about how bad it was? Maybe a college bar, maybe...
There's an Applebee's on the side of the road.
That actually sounds about right. The memory of it is so bad you don't even want to think about it.
It really is. As a matter of fact, there is, now that I'm actually thinking about it, and this is not for comedic effect or even in the script, there is a bar in France that I'll tell you about later, Alan. But let's just say some of us folks are not invited back.
Oh my goodness. A sight that you are ever afterwards loath to recall.
Oh, quite indeed. And of course, Gimli, I love that Tolkien does this. Gimli sees something glimmering in the darkness as Aragorn approaches, and he's muttering to himself. Gimli is about how ordinarily he'd be the first one to race to the glimmer of gold, but not here. He talked about the glittering caves not a few chapters back, but he is absolutely having none of it here and wonders how Aragorn can be so fearless.
Yeah, he really does. I also love the way that Tolkien uses alliteration briefly in there. That away to the left, something glittered in the gloom. And then does he feel no fear? It's just subtle, but it's another little touch of that alliteration that always adds to sort of the musicality of the text.
Love it.
But this is definitely a moment where that epistemic regime not only becomes really noticeable and really visible, but it becomes central to building that tension.
Oh, absolutely. And you think about it, if he had written it from Legolas's perspective, the spirits of some dead men were behind them, but he felt no fear.
Wasn't bothering him at all.
Right. He's
dead guys, schmed guys, who cares? Yeah.
Doesn't matter to him. And he's putting, I always come back to World War I, as I have so often done. I think Tolkien is a master in his own right, in the way Peter Jackson was in horror movie directing, of putting your mind in this grim, fearful state because you are seeing things from the perspective of the person that is arguably the most scared, right? We get a lot of it from Frodo's perspective. When Frodo is captured, spoilers for the, Return of the King portion when Sam storms, we don't see any of being in the castle from Frodo's perspective. We see it only from Sam's. He is the scaredest.
Yeah.
Think about how much different the books would have been had we gotten, Frodo is captured and he remained conscious, and there were we get a little bit of this in the movie for dramatic effect, but certainly the person that is the most scared at any given point is
who knows the least.
And exactly. And I love that.
It is really effective. And as a writer, when Tolkien employs that, it brings us as the reader into that emotional moment, into that fearful moment here. I mean, we really, like you said, you're getting chills reading this because you're able to put yourself in Gimli's shoes and feel that terror of the host of dead behind you.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
But we've got more of it after the break, so come back in just a second. Well, before we get back to the text and the tale of poor Baldur the Hapless, we want to make sure you know that even after you've listened to the episode, there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony Podcast.
The PPP has an amazing listener community, and they're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all our social media spaces. Check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
Now on Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony Podcast. Follow the page to get the news and episode releases, but be sure to join the group for some great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/Prancing Pony Pod. On Twitter and Instagram, we are simply at Prancing Pony Pod.
And please be sure to check out the Rings of Power Wrap-Up. That's my new podcast with Sarah Brown and James Tauber, where we discuss, analyze, and speculate all about Amazon's television adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth.
Alan, James, and Sarah take deep dives into the lore behind the show, or the lore that should be in the show, talk about the themes and the characters, and interview folks involved with the show. So look for the Rings of Power Wrap-Up and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out at Rings Wrap-Up on social media for more.
And folks, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. And when you do, you get a lot. You get a really active Discord community that includes live episode recordings, episode postscripts, episodes without digital ads, and a lot more.
Like free merch and live Discord hangouts, but you can also become part of our Questions After Nightfall episode, or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
And of course, you can also help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and a rating on Spotify. And please recommend us to your friends.
Let's do. You know what? I should probably be doing that now as a host. I don't know if I've actively given you a 5-star review, but
you probably should give yourself a 5-star review. Maybe you could write something like, oh, he's working with Don Marshall right now. That guy is great.
Hyping myself up in the review section of your.
I will see right through that, Don. I'll know
I'm
that's
sure you will. Well, you know what? Joke's on you. I'm going to get every single one of my followers to write a review using my name, so you'll never be able to tell which one is me. How about that, Alan?
Hey, that's fine. If all your listeners come and check us out, I'll be pretty happy about that.
I'm sure many of them were already listening, but Why don't we go ahead and get back into the story? Alan, you want to take this one?
I will indeed. Nonetheless, he drew near and saw Aragorn kneeling, while Elladan held aloft both torches. Before him were the bones of a mighty man. He had been clad in mail, and still his harness lay there whole, for the cavern's air was as dry as dust, and his hauberk was gilded. His belt was of gold and garnets, and rich with gold was the helm upon his bony head, face downward on the floor. He had fallen near the far wall of the cave, as now could be seen, and before him stood a stony door closed fast. His finger bones were still clawing at the cracks. A notched and broken sword lay by him, as if he had hewn at the rock in his last despair. Aragorn did not touch him, but after gazing silently for a while, he rose and sighed. "Hither shall the flowers of Silmarillion come never unto world's end," he murmured. 9 mounds and 7 there are now green with grass, and through all the long years he has lain at the door that he could not unlock. Whither does it lead? Why would he pass? None shall ever know. For that is not my errand, he cried, turning back and speaking to the whispering darkness behind. Keep your hoards and your secrets hidden in the accursed years. Speed only, we ask. Let us pass, and then come. I summon you to the stone of Erech. All right.
Dang.
What a moment that is, huh?
I love that. I love that so much. So good. All right. Gimli manages to, or should I sing song this entire rest of the Gimli managed to overcome his fear.
Probably by thinking of a few of his favorite things.
You know what? Honestly, I'm actually going to say no, he's not, because he's thinking about gold in this moment.
That's true.
And he wants nothing to do with that which glitters. No.
His favorite thing is just getting the heck out.
His life. I think his living is one of my favorite things.
Not dying by the dead men.
When I'm feeling sad.
I simply want to get out of this place.
And then I will feel
so bad.
Dead. So dead.
I love it, Don. That is brilliant. That is good stuff right there.
Stay tuned next week for our entirely musical episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast.
Don't be shocked if it happens either, folks.
Featuring Corey Olson, me, James Tauber, Alan, and a special guest. Can we get Morvith Clark on here? I feel like she's got a wonderful
That'd be
voice.
Great. Yeah.
All right. But back to the actual beginning of the passage. Gimli does manage to overcome his fear and is approaching Aragorn as he kneels to examine this glimmer in the darkness.
That's right. So now Elladan is holding both torches because Aragorn is down there looking at the body. Again, there's 35 people. Can't we carry more light? It's just a thought. I'm going to keep coming back to that.
You know, maybe he meant for there to be more people carrying torches and just only mentioned those two. But honestly, he's so intentional with every one of his words.
He's holding both torches, Don. Both is two and only two.
Well, actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it,
yeah,
one torch in the front, one torch in the back, and you follow it with a line.
That's true.
There may be a method to that so that you don't have 30 people carrying torches, and if you get scattered all of a sudden, there's no semblance of order.
No guidance to follow.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, again, that's just my instant thought about it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Someone who's better at war games than me can talk about that. So anyway, this thing that is seen in the light, we see a mighty mail-clad skeleton, and the armor is still intact. It is air dry, there is no rust, and the detail on the armor suggests that he is royalty. There's that gilded hauberk, the belt of gold and jewels, and a helm of gold.
That's right. And you know what? I didn't even notice this when I was putting the notes together, but as I read that out loud, did you catch all the alliteration again?
Mm-hmm.
Dry as dust, gold and garnets, helm and head, fallen and far, stony and stood, clawing and cracks. I mean, it just doesn't stop. It is fantastic.
I am of the opinion now that if Tolkien could go back and rewrite The Lord of the Rings, he would do so with alliterative verse as a poem.
Like he started to do with the Tale of Turin Turambar, which is, by the way, fantastic.
Oh, it is.
As far as it goes, you want that story to be complete, and it would be lovely in alliterative
The Lay of
verse.
Lathian is just one of the best, I think, accomplishments of his, poetic structuring career. But I would be hard-pressed to say that were the professors still with us and given an extra decade, and the popularity of Tolkien that exists now, it's like, hey, professor, would you go back and write this entire thing in a poem? The whole thing in a poem. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. I don't know what rhymes with hobbit, but yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to rhyme if you're doing alliterative verse. It's already in a hole in the. Well, you wouldn't use ground; you'd use something else.
Yeah.
But
you know what? That's not our job to write the alliterative verse.
No, we don't need to do that. I have played around with alliterative verse before. It's a lot of fun.
Feels like a group project, right? Everybody takes.
It was something I did at a moot or a conference or something like that. It was a group poetry thing.
Amazing.
So going back to this poor mail-clad skeleton, right? You talked about how beautiful the hauberk was and the belt and the helm, but the situation of his body suggests a terrible end. Fingers clawing at the cracks of a door with a broken sword by his side.
It's a terrible thought to even just consider yourself in that position, but
just wait, it gets worse.
It does. It does. And this is, as Theoden tells us in the next chapter, Baldur, son of Brago, the second king of the Mark, and Brago, the father of the dead man here, has become king while Eorl the Young died in the Third Age 2545. So this is a little less than 500 years ago.
Right. So this guy, Baldur, is the son of the king. And it was Brago, this dead guy's dad, who made Edoras the capital of Rohan and built the Golden Hall of Meduseld, completed in Third Age 2569. In fact, it was at a ceremony honoring the opening of Meduseld that all this began. Theoden tells us in the next chapter that that's when Baldur spoke a rash vow as he drained the horn at that feast, which Brago made to hallow new-built Meduseld, and he came never to the high seat of which he was the heir.
And it was the following year, 2570, in which Brago passed the door of the dead and was never seen again. And this certainly goes a long way towards explaining the reaction of the men of Rohan to Aragorn's decision.
Yeah, this is a long-standing superstition. 500 years, this place has been haunted. 500 years ago, the king's son went in there and never came out. And speaking of the king's son, we learn a little bit more about Baldur's fate in a note that Tolkien included in the Rivers and Beacon Hills of Gondor, which was published in full in The Nature of Middle-earth. In talking about ancient monuments and how the men of Gondor didn't build temples or religious buildings, because the men of Numenor didn't either, Tolkien writes in a really disturbing footnote, the men of darkness built temples, some of great size, usually surrounded by dark trees, often in caverns, natural or delved, in secret valleys of mountain regions, such as the dreadful halls and passages under the haunted mountain beyond the dark door, Gate of the Dead, in Dunharrow. The special horror of the closed door before which the skeleton of Baldur was found was probably due to the fact that the door was the entrance to an evil temple hall to which Baldur had come, probably without opposition up to that point. But the door was shut in his face, and enemies that had followed him silently came up and broke his legs and left him to die in the darkness unable to find any way out.
Oh my God.
Which leaves you with this chilling challenge: to find a way out.
One, nicely done. But I've always wondered, I wasn't going to let that go unmentioned. I have always wondered, though, why he hadn't just turned around if he couldn't get through the door. Too. But this kind of explains it, right? That is terrifying.
It is.
It's also really cruel, too. Like, if the dead can break his legs, they could have just broken his neck, right? They were malevolent. They really wanted him to suffer.
Oh, just nasty. I mean, terrifying to lie there dying of thirst or starvation, unable to move, unable to carry yourself anywhere. Just terrifying.
Ugh.
So back to the text in this cheery moment. Folks, we do hope to end on a happier note at some point. Aragorn doesn't touch Baldur's body, probably a wise idea, but stands up and talks about Silmarillion and the mounds of the kings of Rohan.
Silmarillion means evermind, likely from the Old English symbol, meaning ever, and mine, meaning mind.
Right. Now, Silmarillion is also called Uilos, which translates more to ever white than ever mind. When Tuor sees these little flowers between the 4th and 5th gates on his way to Gondolin. But it's also known as Alfarin when seen on the tomb of Elendil. Now, Alfarin means not dying, from Al meaning not, and Firin meaning mortal. And thanks to Parma Eldalamber on number 17 for that.
You may also recognize Alfarin as the seeds that are mentioned in the Rings of Power.
Right.
Yeah. I thought that was a nice little callback that they did there.
That was a nice little callback. I agree.
This reference, though, to the mounds is talking about the length of time that's passed since Baldur made his ill-fated attempt. He's been dead for 450 years, and all of the mounds, except for the first, for Eorl,
and fell off his horse, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. Always got to include the horse. Have gone up in that time. It's crazy to think about.
All those mounds. Then Aragorn literally gives us a textual ruin. Where does this door lead? Why would Baldur want to go there? Well, I guess we'll never know. Moving on. Thanks, Aragorn.
Tolkien, you went into so much detail about so many things. Just tell us what. You know what?
Yeah.
I think I might know what's behind that door. I'm thinking about it now. Mm-hmm. There's probably some sort of temple, right? This altar where the men that worshipped Sauron in those days used for some sort of sacrifice or worship or whatever.
Maybe human sacrifice.
You never know.
Be the first people to do that.
Yeah. But now, of course, he turns to talk to the whispering darkness that Gimli has been hearing all this time.
Oh, man. He tells them, I'm not interested in your treasure. I'm not interested in your secrets. Just let us pass, but follow us. You are being summoned to the Stone of Erech. And then you're going to pick up exactly where I left off.
With pleasure.
With Gimli's long night. Oh, man.
Whew. There was no answer, unless it were an utter silence, more dreadful than the whispers before. And then a chill blast came, in which the torches flickered and went out, and could not be rekindled. Of the time that followed, 1 hour or many, Gimli remembered little. The others pressed on, but he was ever hindmost, pursued by a groping horror that seemed always just about to seize him. And a rumor came after him, like the shadow sound of many feet. He stumbled on until he was crawling like a beast on the ground, and felt that he could endure no more. He must either find an ending and escape, or run back in madness to meet the following fear. Suddenly, he heard the tinkle of water, a sound hard and clear as a stone falling into a dream of dark shadow. Light grew, and lo, the company passed through another gateway, high-arched and broad, and a rill ran out beside them, and beyond, going steeply down, was a road between sheer cliffs, knife-edged against the sky far above. So deep and narrow was that chasm that the sky was dark, and in it small stars glinted. Yet as Gimli after learned, it was still 2 hours ere sunset of the day on which they had set out from Dunharrow, though for all that he could then tell, it might have been twilight in some later year or in some other world.
Oh my.
Oh,
That is seriously
chills
creepy.
again. Chills
Yeah.
again.
What a nightmare scenario for Gimli.
Aside from Shelob, I think this might be one of the scariest moments
Yeah.
in the book.
I agree. Wholeheartedly agree. And I think this is scarier for a very different reason. It is much more abstract fear.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It's not the claustrophobia of a cave. It's very just the fear of the mind, the fear of if you look back, you're going to die. If you go forward, you're going to die. There's this fear of death all around you.
Oh, my goodness. So as terrifying as it has been so far for Gimli, going back to the beginning of this passage, it is about to get significantly worse.
It is a dreadful silence in response to Aragorn's summons, followed by a cold blast of air that blew out the torches.
Well, there you go. I mean, it somehow also prevented them from being lit again. So I guess at this point, my complaints about all 35 of them carrying torches is really moot, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter after all. So sorry about that. But now we enter this time that Gimli can hardly recall at all. I mean, it must have been, several hours, as we'll be able to sort of deduce shortly, though.
Right. I mean, he's always at the tail end of this, unable to keep up during this whole time. He's chased by this terror that is so close that he feels like it's about to grab hold of him. If he stops for even a millisecond, they're going to grab him. That is a terrifying feeling. And then he even hears this sound of a host of feet, the shadow sound of many feet. That is disturbing.
It's given me chills just talking about it now, and it's so bad. And I went back and I reread this because I missed it the first time. Gimli ends up crawling on the ground.
Yeah.
Trying to get through. And either the end comes now or he is going to be taken by this madness and come face to face with the dead.
Yeah. This is very Lovecraftian in a way.
Oh, sure.
In terms of being taken by the madness, this idea that soon his mind will no longer be his own. He won't be able to keep going with this. This is seriously, seriously scary stuff. And it's showing us his masterful skill at writing horror. And I'm thinking of all those other moments. You mentioned Shelob's Lair, thinking like the Barrow Downs. That whole thing was scary right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Dead Marshes were pretty scary.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I will say, though, I think this one, I mean, I'm terrified of spiders as is. I know they're like good arachnids that, help eat all of the bugs. But to me, the Paths of the Dead is so theater of the mind type of fear, right? The Dead Marshes, there's dead bodies. Shelob's Lair, giant spider. Barrow Wights, trees that'll eat you, and spirits that will haunt you. But this is quite literally just a fear that you cannot see, you can only hear.
Yeah.
And losing one of your senses is terrifying to an extent. And the fact that this goes on for several hours and leaves you crawling on the ground, I think Paths of the Dead for me takes the top spot in terms of fear.
I would agree with that. I might put Shelob's Lair, I might even put the Barrow Downs ahead of Shelob's Lair. Again, I think there's something about the dead that is so terrifying, and the way Tolkien writes about them makes it even more so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, keep in mind, and again, it all comes back to World War I for me. Tolkien was surrounded by the dead in World War I. There was not a day that went by, I'm sure, that he didn't see some sort of wounded soldier or dead soldier.
No, not when he was out there at the Battle of the Somme. No chance. Not given the number of casualties that that were suffered there.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
I mean, and the Dead Marshes are, if you want to look for a place where that veil is thin between Tolkien's real world experience and the story of the Lord of the Rings, it's the Dead Marshes.
100%.
We talked about that at length, but and folks, if you are interested in learning more about that, I highly recommend John Garth's Tolkien and the Great War, which is available, through our library links, and we'll make sure there's a link to that specific book in the show notes, because that is probably the primary source for a lot of this stuff.
It's a wonderful read too, and Alan, you and I have had the pleasure of meeting John Garth.
John is fantastic. He's been on the Prancing Pony podcast. I think he actually holds the record for the most appearances. Not just solo appearances, but he's been on the show, on different panels that we've had and things like that. I think he's been with us 5 or 6 times. He's great.
Wow. All right. Yeah. Well, fortunately, Gimli finally is able to escape. And of all things, and I love that Tolkien does this, it always comes back to nature. It is the sound of tinkling water that brings him out of it.
That is a great sound. I mean, at this point, while it's a great sound and we all love the sound of a little mountain stream, who doesn't? It's described in a way that's almost shocking. It's a sound hard and clear as a stone falling into a dream of dark shadow. It shocks the system, right? It brings Gimli out of this darkness, which, again, he wouldn't have been able to take for much longer. Mm-mm. So a little bit of light grows, and the company gets through a wide gate next to this small stream that's making the sound of the tinkling water, and they get onto a road that runs between these steep cliffs, looking straight up to the sky above.
Yeah, and this is such a deep canyon that Gimli could see stars in the dark sky, even though it was still 2 hours before sunset on that same day.
That's right. And that does tell us a little bit about the amount of time that it took to get through the Paths of the Dead. So at their approximate latitude in March, which is when this is, there would be 11 to 11 and a half hours between sunrise and sunset. That's how much total daylight there'd be. Now, they did leave after sunrise,
right?
But before the sun had gone above the eastern ridges, so maybe an hour into the day. And they're now 2 hours before sunset. So the journey through the Paths of the Dead has taken around 8 hours in total.
And this fits with the distances that were given in The War of the Ring, because in a footnote, Christopher Tolkien explains that the second of the maps that his father drew of this region shows the distance of about 45 miles from Dunharrow to Erech. And in later notes, Christopher would explain about a penciled note in the margin that presumably 25 miles. So that refers to the distance from the issue of the Paths of the Dead to the Stone of Erech.
So that means 20 miles through the Paths of the Dead from, let's say, 8 a.m. to about 4 p.m. And then another 25 miles to go before midnight. Now, 20 miles in 8 hours is very achievable in good conditions. Now, doing it in the darkness and through caverns chased by dead men, it's probably a bit more difficult, but it's still only 2.5 miles an hour. So it's kind of a slowish walking speed, really. But they will have to average a bit faster than that now to get to the Stone of Erech by midnight, but they can mount their horses now, so really it should be fine.
It's good to know that Gimli can at least crawl 2.5 miles an hour.
Well, averaged. So let's assume they were doing 3.5 earlier and he crawls down to like 1.5 during that stage. But yeah.
Sure. So one other science thing, though, before we wrap up this section, the idea of being able to see stars in the daytime sky from the bottom of a steep-walled canyon, this is often called the chimney effect, but it is better called the chimney myth, as research and observation shows. It is not possible.
That's correct. I mean, the idea is nice, right? The idea is that the chimney, in this case, the cliff walls, shield the eyes from the sun. And so the eye opens up, right? The pupil dilates and you can gather more light, including stars in the daytime sky. You could then be able to make out that detail. It's an ancient idea, and the concept goes back as far as Aristotle. And of course, anything that goes back that far, the concept's going to find its way into literature. But science demonstrates it's just simply not possible unless you're also in a total solar eclipse, but that's a different story. It is possible, though, under nearly perfect circumstances, to see Venus in the daytime sky. So that is a possibility if you know where to look. But Venus shines 10 times brighter than the brightest star in the night sky, and that's serious.
Yeah, the atmospheric scattering of the sun's light basically makes it impossible to see any star with the unaided eye. But hey, it gets the idea across about just how deep they are and how steep this chasm is.
Exactly. It's a literary thing, and we're not going to give too hard a time about it. It's one of these concepts that Tolkien seems to love precisely because of its ancientry, not necessarily because of its accuracy. So it's a neat concept. Just know that no matter how many steep chasms you look up, you're never going to see the stars.
Fair enough. Meantime, Gimli finally catches up with Legolas. They all get on their horses. They're riding single file down this road. Dusk falls, but they can still feel the dead behind them.
Oh, that's got to be terrifying. Now you're out of the caves. It should feel better, but it doesn't feel better because you got a whole lot of dead folk right behind you.
Oh, yeah.
So Legolas turns around to have a little chat with Gimli, and Gimli can see the glimmers reflecting in Legolas's eyes.
What do your elf eyes see? I mean, take a look.
I see dead people.
Pulling a little M. Night Shyamalan here.
There you go.
Eladon is now bringing up the rear. It's not Gimli anymore, much to his own approval.
Yeah, he's pretty thrilled about that. But then Legolas gives us the details of what his elf eyes do, in fact, see. Skies of blue, clouds of white, bright, blessed day. Oh, wait, that's not what he's seeing, is it?
No. Although I would have paid a lot of good money just then to hear your impression.
Bright, blessed day, dark, sacred night, and I think to myself.
Also shapes of men and horses, pale banners and spears like thickets, and of course it's all phantasmal.
And why does that sound like Kermit and
there's a little bit of there's a little bit of a comparison in there,
Yeah,
Alan.
there is.
You gotta just bring it up for the Kermit here, and then you gotta bring it down.
You gotta do the gravel. Yeah.
Explosive process.
Oh man. All right.
We're having far too much fun. So songs aside, the thing that Gimli sees, it's the shapes of men and horses, pale banners, spears like thickets. The dead are following, and Eladon confirms this. They have been summoned.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize for all the singing, folks.
No.
Those responsible for all the singing have been sacked.
Alan, we're like halfway through this episode, man. You need me for this.
That is true. Those responsible for sacking those who've been singing have also been sacked.
Please join Corey Olson exclusively for the next episode, where he will spend the next 4 episodes
discussing the next paragraph.
Discussing the next lines of text. Yes. We will reach the next chapter, The Muster of Rohan, in roughly 2027. Good luck.
Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Corey, I did not tell him to say that, brother.
He knows. I've given him enough grief for the length of time. But meantime, Alan, would you like to take the next portion?
I would. So, of course, they get out of the ravine, and I'm going to pick up after that. Where in Middle-earth are we? Said Gimli. And Eladon answered, We have descended from the uprising of the Morthond, the long chill river that flows at last to the sea that washes the walls of Dol Amroth. You will not need to ask hereafter how comes its name. Black Root, men call it. The Morthond Vale made a great bay that beat up against the sheer southern faces of the mountains. Its steep slopes were grass-grown, but all was gray in that hour, for the sun had gone, and far below lights twinkled in the homes of men. The vale was rich, and many folk dwelt there. Then, without turning, Aragorn cried aloud so that all could hear, Friends, forget your weariness. Ride now. Ride. We must come to the stone of Erech ere this day passes, and long still is the way. So without looking back, they rode the mountain fields, until they came to a bridge over the growing torrent and found a road that went down into the land. Lights went out in house and hamlet as they came, and doors were shut, and folk that were afield cried in terror and ran wild like hunted deer. Ever there rose the same cry in the gathering night, The King of the Dead! The King of the Dead has come upon us! Bells were ringing far below, and all men fled before the face of Aragorn. But the grey company in their haste rode like hunters until their horses were stumbling with weariness. And thus, just ere midnight, and in a darkness as black as the caverns in the mountains, they came at last to the hill of Erech.
I'm just imagining the real world equivalent of something like this, and it almost seems to me as though if you saw a guy riding a horse and Bigfoot was chasing him, how do you think you'd react?
I don't know. It's just one Bigfoot. But if it's an army of Bigfoot...
how about an army of Bigfoots? Yeah, let's
I'm going to hide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing as these townspeople.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, for them, this area has been haunted for a very long time. So, I mean, they're aware of that. And we'll get to that, some more details later.
Yeah. So the company comes out of the canyon and into the upper part of the valley. Eladon answers Gimli's question about where they are. This is the Blackroot Vale. And this river, the Morthond, goes all the way to the sea.
That's right. Now, to be clear, Eladon is not saying that the river washes the walls of Dol Amroth. It's the sea that the river flows into that washes the walls of Dol Amroth. The river actually joins the Ringlow, which itself had already been joined by the river Kirill, before they combine, flow into the sea at Ethelond.
Yeah, and this is a very rich valley. It is a well-populated area.
Yeah, this is a big agricultural area, no doubt. If you recall, the lord of this area, Duinhir, and his sons Derafin and Duilin, they took a company of about 500 bowmen to Minas Tirith last chapter.
Yeah, and Aragorn yells out, again, without turning around to the riders, ride hard, ignore your fatigue for the moment, just relax, press on.
Get it done. We got to hurry. We got to get to the Stone of Erech before midnight. That shouldn't be a problem. It's a distance of 25 miles from where they left the Paths of the Dead, and they are on horseback, and they should have at least 7 hours
They've
So
got some
it should
time.
be
Yeah.
doable.
Yeah. And eventually they reach a bridge that crosses the Morthond and they head down to the valley. When they do, they find that the villages and towns have shut their doors and turn off their lights as they come. And I don't blame them.
Then there are those that are caught outside. They're running in fear. They're just, get away, right? The king of the dead is come upon us. Let's talk a little bit about the terror that these people would be feeling.
Yeah, because you got to remember, these folks are, living generation after generation of just constant fear and terror of this haunted thing.
Oh, yeah. Every time something bad happens, it's because the area is haunted, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's the source of all their ills.
Yeah, you can blame anything you want on this problem, and all of a sudden, the source of that problem is on your front doorstep.
Yeah. With an entire army of dead.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Absolutely horrifying.
The moment they've all been living in fear of for generations, like you said. Yeah.
And here it is, arriving on your doorstep. Like, hi, we're not here to help, but we're not here to hurt you.
Yeah, we won't kill you, maybe.
Ish. Just don't make us angry.
Yeah, exactly.
Thankfully, they do ride hard, nearly to the limit of their horses, because remember, stumbling in weariness. You don't want a stumbling horse. If you got a stumbling horse, you got a huge problem.
Yeah, you do.
But they do get to the Stone of Eric by midnight.
My goodness, I hope they get those horses some rest. It is being described, by the way, in the text as black as the caverns in the mountains. And yet, and this is where we have to kind of look at the way the story kind of came to be. It was actually a full moon last night, and at midnight, this almost full moon, one day past the full, would be almost directly overhead. So it would actually be pretty bright in theory, rather than as black as the caves. But this is actually a carryover. It's one of those things that Tolkien was very intentional about, but then he forgot to fix when he changed the dates. This was a carryover from when this event took place a day later, after the Dawnless Day, when all was obscured by the clouds coming from Mordor.
Wild stuff.
So just a little interesting tidbit there. Now they're at the stone, and Dawn, I'm going to have you pick up right there.
With pleasure. Long had the terror of the dead lain upon that hill, and upon the empty fields about it. For upon the top stood a black stone, round as a great globe, the height of a man, though its half was buried in the ground. Unearthly it looked, as though it had fallen from the sky, as some believe. But those who remembered still the lore of Westerness told that it had been brought out of the ruin of Numenor, and there set by Isildur at his landing. None of the people of the valley dared to approach it, nor would they dwell near, for they said that it was a trysting place of the shadow men, and there they would gather in times of fear, thronging around the stone and whispering. To that stone the company came and halted in the dead of night. Then Elrohir gave to Aragorn a silver horn, and he blew upon it, and it seemed to those that stood near that they heard the sound of answering horns, as if it was an echo in deep caves far away. No other sound they heard, and yet they were aware of a great host gathered all about the hill on which they stood, and a chill wind, like the breath of ghosts, came down from the mountains.
Okay, we're going to talk about that for sure.
Oh,
wow. The breath
prophecy
of ghosts. That is a metaphor you don't hear very often.
And the prophecy fulfilled, blowing the horn.
Oh my goodness. Chills again.
This hour-long appointed that he's been talking about for the last 2 episodes with us, it's finally here.
It is.
It's finally here. And wouldn't you know it, most of the people are terrified of this prophecy being fulfilled.
Yeah. I mean, the stone itself and the surrounding fields are, of course, totally terrifying to the residents. Nobody lives near it. Nobody even wants to approach it. But let's look at the stone itself. Don, talk to us about that.
Of course. It is round like a globe. And keep in mind, it's huge. It's the height of a man, though its half was buried.
Now, that's an interesting statement, okay? Is it the height of a man even though its half was buried, meaning that it's 6 feet tall outside of the ground, thus a 12-foot diameter sphere? Or is it the height of a man, but half of it is buried? The way it says though its half was buried makes me think we're talking about a 12-foot diameter stone.
That is what I am thinking as well. Yeah. Let's talk about just how big that is and how massive that would be, because rock weighs on average, here's a fun, obscure geology fact, 165 pounds per cubic foot. But depending on the type of stone, which I don't think we ever get from this stone,
No.
could be anywhere from 143 pounds to 186 pounds.
So yeah, depending on the density of the rock, right? Well, with a diameter of 12 feet, if we are going with 6 foot outside of the ground with half its height, that sphere, sound of mathematics being done furiously in the background, would contain 288 cubic feet. Now that is anywhere from 41,000 to almost 54,000 pounds, depending on the density of the rock, or between 21 and 27 tons. That's U.S. tons. 18 and a half to 24 imperial tons for those of you on the other side of the pond. That's massive.
It is massive, and I feel like it is almost one of those Tolkien things of, don't think about it too much.
Which we do anyway.
Well, of course we do. But assuming the smaller diameter, though, of 6 feet, it becomes slightly more manageable, 6,000 pounds, which is 3 U.S. tons.
Well, that's a lot less when you think. And of course, that's because of the way globes work, right? Yeah. Spheres and geometry. So, I have to admit that all of a sudden I'm leaning towards that 6 foot diameter, that it's the height of a man, but half of it is still buried.
Yeah.
Because that makes the idea of transporting it by boat from Numenor and up the valley from the sea a whole lot more reasonable.
Absolutely.
Moving something that weighs, let's call it 22, 23 tons, moving that by ship from Numenor and then somehow getting it up the river to the top of this valley seems impractical, to say the least.
Is it possible, though, that it is some sort of, I don't know, what is it that's very lightweight? Is it obsidian that's very lightweight?
Like a pumice stone or something like
that.
But
yes.
Pumice is not smooth. Pumice is, that bubbly, it's got a lot of holes in it, and it's the stuff you'd use like to scrub the bottom of your feet. You might get a pumice stone, right?
Only in Tolkien can we spend a good 5 minutes discussing a single stone that he mentions. I love it.
Yeah, obsidian would actually be, very heavy. It's a very glass-like rock. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
It would also be very hard to be perfectly spherical because obsidian, it flakes off and breaks in a way that you can't really do that with.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Well, thank you for I've been playing too much Minecraft. Thank you for my corrections. We do also get the origin of the stone, right? Brought out of the destruction of Numenor, placed here by Isildur after he landed.
However, if we look at one of the earlier drafts of The Last Debate, right? That's the chapter in which this story is told by flashback. We read that old tales tell that the stone was brought in ages past from Numenor before its fall, when its ships would come to the west shores of the world.
It does kind of make a bit more sense than having a huge stone stowed in one of the vessels awaiting the faithful off the coast of Numenor just prior to the downfall. Like, here's
exactly.
The stone.
They were putting their important stuff in those boats, and there were only 9 of them, right? There were 4 for Elendil, 3 for Isildur, and 2 for Anarion. 9 ships, and you're probably not going to take up half the hull of one with one big rock.
Seems like a waste of space to me, just personally.
So I kind of like this older version. I know it's not, the canonical version is that Isildur brought it with him. Okay, great. And then Isildur, yeeted the stone up the valley. Yeet Isildur.
Oh no, you brought my catchphrase into this.
That's right, I did. That's right.
For those that are maybe unaware, we get the question. Alan, I'm sure you've got this question 100 times over. Why didn't Elrond just throw Isildur into the lava?
We get that question all the time.
All the time. Well, my fun sort of what if scenario, sort of like what Marvel does for their properties. I'm guessing like a war starts between the elves and the humans.
Oh, yeah.
Because Elrond's not going to lie about throwing in. He's like, no, I threw him in.
I threw him into the fire, yeah.
It was necessary. Sorry. Oops. Or they both fall in. Elrond dies. Isildur dies. And all of a sudden it's like, what happened?
Right.
Why did the mountain just explode? And how many troops did we just lose?
And then a few years later, Elrond shows up again. Hi, I'm back.
Surprise.
Mandos says hi. All right. So with the history of the stone told to us, we come back to the arrival of the Grey Company to the stone itself right before midnight. And this is when we get that horn that was giving you chills.
Yep. Elro here gives a silver horn to Aragorn, blows it. And remember the part of the words of Malbeth the Seer, for the hour is come for the oath breakers at the stone of Erech. They shall stand again and hear there a horn in the hills ringing.
Oh, I love that alliteration.
Mm-hmm.
And hear there a horn in the hills ringing. Ah, the hour has come for the oath breakers. So the ghostly horns reply, and again, it's that sort of phantasmal sort of way, right? As if an echo in deep caves far away. Nothing sounds like it's present right here. You can hear it, but it doesn't sound like it's right here. And again, that's just because of the nature of the dead.
Yeah, and while we don't hear anything else, they are quite aware of this presence, this large host. Even the wind is described as sort of evidence of the dead, like the breath of ghosts.
That is a terrifying metaphor. By the way, before we move on, I want to own up to a mistake I made in episode 269. I referred to the Dead Men of Dunharrow once or twice as the Army of the Dead. That term is actually only used in the Jackson films. In the text, they go by many, many other names. They're known as the Men of the Mountains, the Dead Men of Dunharrow, the Sleepless Dead, the Grey Host, the Shadow Host, the Shadow Men, or even just the Shadows, but never the Army of the Dead.
Tolkien continuing his name with dozens of names for the one thing, except the one that makes the most sense.
Well, they could be the Marine Corps of the Dead. They could be,
the Air
they're
Force
probably not the Coast
Dead.
Guard of the Dead. So,
well, honestly though,
they kind of serve that role, don't they?
They do serve that role. They're scaring away people from their ships, keeping the shores safe. What can I say? If we get flying Army of the Dead, though, in some sort of Air Force style
Air Force of the Dead?
Yeah. Air Force of the Dead. Hang on, I just thought of a really cool fan fiction. I need to go write it. Alan, would you excuse me a moment?
For a very short moment, sir.
Air Force of the Dead. All right. Well, while I write the fan fiction, Alan, would you like to read this last portion as we reach the end of this chapter? Gotta finish the chapter.
All right. But Aragorn dismounted, and standing by the stone, he cried in a great voice, "Oathbreakers, why have ye come?" And a voice was heard out of the night that answered him as if from far away, "To fulfill our oath and have peace." Then Aragorn said, "The hour is come at last. Now I go to Pelargir upon Anduin, and ye shall come after me. And when all this land is clean of the servants of Sauron, I will hold the oath fulfilled, and ye shall have peace and depart forever. For I am Elessar, Isildur's heir of Gondor." And with that he bade Halbarad unfurl the great standard which he had brought, and behold, it was black, and if there was any device upon it, it was hidden in the darkness. Then there was silence, and not a whisper nor a sigh was heard again all the long night. The company camped beside the stone, but they slept little because of the dread of the shadows that hedged them round. But when the dawn came, cold and pale, Aragorn rose at once, and he led the company forth upon the journey of greatest haste and weariness that any among them had known, save he alone, and only his will held them to go on. No other mortal men could have endured it, none but the Dunedain of the north, and with them Gimli the dwarf and Legolas of the elves. They passed Tarlang's neck and came to Lamadon, and the shadow host pressed behind, and fear went on before them, until they came to Calimbel upon Ciril, and the sun went down like blood behind Pinnath Gelin, away in the west behind them. The township and the fords of Ciril they found deserted, for many men had gone away to war, and all that were left fled to the hills at the rumor of the coming of the King of the Dead. But the next day there came no dawn, and the Grey Company passed on into the darkness of the storm of Mordor, and were lost to mortal sight. But the dead followed them.
Ooh.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow. Just wow.
What a good chapter, you know?
Isn't it?
What a good chapter.
It really is. It's a satisfying chapter. I'm so glad. Remember we talked about this a couple episodes ago. There was a moment in the story that this part of the story was going to end, and we were going to get what is now the Muster of Rohan as the finish of this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how I know that a lot of it is still told in flashback, you know, the battle at Pelargir and all of that. But I loved that we got to go through the paths of the dead in the narrative, and what a difference that makes in the story. And boy, it sure does.
Yeah. And I would argue it makes it a little bit, you know, more of a cliffhanger and so much more what's that eucatastrophe moment when Aragorn arrives in Minas Tirith. So you're left with this sense of, are they going to make it in time? Are they going to make it in time? Because so much of this is, we're out of time, we need to go, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, like that Lin-Manuel Miranda song that he wrote a while ago. I know. Anyway, all of that is to say that this is, again, what a way to end a chapter, but we got to go back to the beginning a little bit, because Aragorn dismounts from his horse and cries out in what seems to be some sort of formal ceremony almost. It's Oathbreakers, why have ye come?
And I want to note the archaic but deferential ye, right? We've talked about thee before. Here's an example of using you, right? The deferential you, but he's using the archaic version, ye. And it's again with the phantasmal and ghostly descriptions, right? The voice now is said to come as if from far away, saying to fulfill our oath and have peace. That whole idea of as if from far away, we see that in the Barrows as well. There's a lot of that remoteness.
Yeah. And in fact, in an earlier draft, the one where the stone was said to have been brought to Numenor before its fall, like we were just talking about, we do get some detail as to why this area feels so haunted.
Oh, we sure do. And I'm going to read from that right now. For none will dwell near the hill of Erech, because it is said that at times the shadow men will gather there, thronging about the ruined wall and whispering. Okay, that's very similar to what this version of the text says, right? It's a trysting place where they come and they whisper. Going back to that draft. And though their tongue is now long forgotten, it is said that they cry, we are come, and they wish to fulfill the broken oath and be at rest. But the terror of the dead lies on that hill and all the land about. Man, that is deeply disturbing. The ghosts of these men have for centuries come to the stone and called out every night, we are come, desiring to fulfill their oath.
Please just let us rest. There's a desperation.
The agony. And again, we talked about this, right? The gift of men. And to deny that is really, really hard. I mean, you're making these mortal men suffer. Now, of course, they're suffering because they're oath breakers, and we talked about the importance of oaths, and we talked about Iluvatar and all of that. But man, it doesn't make their suffering any less, terrible.
No, it is. Back to the final text, though, because instead of that particularly creepy draft, Aragorn gives them basically the travel itinerary. This is your terms and conditions. I'm going to Pelagir on the Anduin, and he uses ye again, like you just mentioned. Ye are coming with me. So once this land is emptied of Sauron's servants, the oath is fulfilled.
And that's when you will finally have peace and depart forever. And that's the point, right? For men bound to Arda, for beyond their natural lives is a terrible fate, but now they will finally be free to leave the circles of the world.
And he confirms this authority to basically make an offer. He is the heir of Isildur.
That's right. And that's when we get to see the standard that Halbarad brought. Wait, actually, we don't get to see it. It's black, and we don't see a single device upon it because of the darkness. Thanks a lot, Tolkien. Appreciate it.
I wonder if that'll come into play later at all.
Oh, I think it might.
Oh, yeah? You think so? Okay. We do find out later in the Battle of Pelennor Fields, the device upon the banner is the standard of Elendil, a black field with 7 stars made of gems, a white tree for Gondor, and a crown made of mithril and gold.
Oh, that is just going to be gorgeous. There may come a day when we see this standard, but it is not this day.
Several months from now, most likely.
That's true. I mean, it may only be a few days away in real life, but in terms of podcast time, it's a while. Yeah. Now, the response is utter silence, but it really is a total silence, right? We don't hear the sound of the feet of the dead. We don't get any more of their murmuring and whispering in an ancient tongue. It would appear they've accepted the end user license agreement here. They've agreed to the terms.
100%. They camp near the stone. Of course, nobody gets much sleep at all because they're surrounded by the shadow.
Seriously.
Dawn arrives, and we are now on March 9th. Aragorn leads them away from the stone and the hill of Erech.
And it's on a journey so tiring and at such a high pace that it's more than any of them had ever known. And this includes a group of 30 rangers, as well as 2 sons of Elrond and Legolas and Gimli. And let's not forget, they've done that.
And keep in mind, Eladon and Elro here, right, are the ones that went after the orcs that captured their mother.
Right.
So I can't
They've gone on some
imagine.
pretty long journeys. Yeah.
I imagine they were riding pretty much nonstop until they found the orcs. And this, pushing themselves quite literally to the limit of elven strength. Just
that's saying something.
Mm-hmm.
And it took the incredible will of Aragorn to push them along. And honestly, this is another reason I'm not quite a fan of the film Aragorn. And I'm not talking about Viggo's portrayal, because that was absolutely spot on, amazing. He did fantastic. But the writing of him as sort of doubtful and kind of a little bit meek, that's not at all book Aragorn, who has this incredible strength of will and this incredible confidence, right? The confidence to look in the stone and to wrestle with Sauron there, and the strength of will to lead these men. It takes a once-in-a-generation leader to push a group of men and horses to this pace, but Aragorn does it.
Yeah, and we are told quite literally, no one else could have endured the length, the pace of this ride. It is just the Rangers, Legolas and Gimli. The latter two, of course, have some experience in very long, high-speed chases, although, of course, that one was on foot.
That's true. This is a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
This whole idea of, you had it hard because you were on foot and now you're on horseback. It makes me think of that hypothetical conversation between Maedhros and Hurin, right? So, Maedhros, chained to Thangorodrim for a few days and, finally gets rescued. And, Hurin's telling him about how, he had to endure this terrible, threat. And he had to sit there and watch as these terrible things happened. And Maedhros is like, you had a chair? I mean... At least you got to sit down, man.
When you put it like that, oh my God. Wait, you had a chair. God, that's so true though. That's so true.
Oh man. So Legolas and Gimli, I mean, sure, they've done the, really long chase on foot, but as hard as that was, this text is telling us this is even harder, even though it's on horseback. It's even harder. The pace, the effort, the amount of time, the endurance that this takes. So during the journey, they passed this thing called Tarlang's Neck. And this has kind of come up before. People have wondered, what in the world is Tarlang's Neck? What is a neck, geographically speaking, right?
Right.
Well, in the Atlas of Middle-earth, Karen Fonstad doesn't say anything about it, but it does appear to be drawn as a pass between the main range and a range of hills that extend to the south. What about Journeys of Frodo?
Yeah, so in Journeys of Frodo, Barbara Strachey says, this may have been a ridge. There was certainly a ridge of hills stretching southwest from the main range at this point, according to the map of Gondor in Return of the King. But to my mind, it seems more likely that the neck was a long, narrow gully among the hills through which the road ran.
And I can understand why she would think that, but she was actually on the right path to begin with. It turns out that Tarlang's Neck is a ridge. Hammond and Skull point to Tolkien's nomenclature that says the neck was a long ridge of rock over which the road climbed, joining the main mass of the range to the branch containing 3 peaks, which separated the plain of Erech from Lamadon. Tarlang, originally the name of this ridge, was later taken as a personal name.
But are we stopping here? No. Of course we're not. Never. In the manuscript, Tolkien had written a much longer note with a bracketed note saying, don't copy this. So folks, this is decidedly not the story, but it is very fun anyway.
I agree. Or at least he didn't want to include it in the nomenclature, because remember, the purpose of that document was for translators to know how to translate things or whether to translate things. There were often times where Tolkien would say, and this should remain untranslated because of this reason. Right. But then if you're going to translate this is what the name means. So then translate it in your language to mean the same thing.
Yeah.
So in that, he says, actually, Tarlang was probably the original name of this ridge or neck. It means stiff neck, for the road over it was hard and laborious and was only used by those in great need or haste. But owing to the fact that lang, neck, was also applied to the neck of men and animals, while Tarlang was a not uncommon man's name, there grew up a local legend to explain the name. It was said that when in ancient days some giants were building the White Mountains as a wall to keep men out of their land by the sea, one of them, called Tarlang, tripped and fell on his face, and as he was carrying a heavy load of rocks on his head, he broke his neck and was killed. The other giants used his body to complete the wall at that point, but left his neck lying southward, leading to the 3 mountains of the spur, Dol Tarlang, Tarlang's head, Cúl Veleg, big load, and Cúl Bin, little load. The break in his neck was shown by a depression in the ridge near the junction with Tarlang's Head, over which the road went. I love it.
That is just such a fun little digression
Isn't
of
it?
stone giant lore that Tolkien only touches on once in The Hobbit and then never, ever again.
I know. I love these sort of, these crazy mythological things that couldn't have happened, right? A mountain range made out of a giant, who fell. But that's such a cool story.
It is. And it's one of those like, oh, maybe not. I don't know.
I love it.
But of course, off the company ride into Lamadon, followed by this shadow host, they get to Callambel, a town on the river Kirill.
That's right. Now, a little bit of word nerdery here. In the unfinished index, Tolkien says that Callambel means greenham. Now, it looks to be a compound of Callan, like green, as in Calanarthon or Parth Gallan, which is a Lenited version, and Bel, which is a Lenited form of Pel, meaning fenced field, as in Pelennor. Now, for those who might not understand the ham reference, like Greenham, well, okay, it's spelled Greenham, but you would pronounce it Greenham. It's a Saxon word for home or settlement, like Birmingham or Nottingham. Same kind of concept. So Greenham.
Good to know. And we see that the sun is going down. I love this phrase. Down like blood behind the hills to the west.
Yes.
That is. A red sun rises. Blood has been
Or
spilled.
sets in this case, but yes.
Pretty much. This is of course, the same sunset that Frodo and Sam will see near the crossroads. To the right, the mountains of Gondor glowed, remote in the west, under a fire-flecked sky.
Okay, so down like blood, fire-flecked sky, and it's the same sunset that Pippin sees from Minas Tirith. But in the west, the dying sun had set all the fume on fire, and now Mindalluin stood black against a burning smolder, flecked with embers. So ends a fair day in wrath, he said. Ooh. Quite a dramatic sunset, really.
I mean, if Tolkien's going to write anything, it's going to be a dramatic sunset. That seems perfectly on.
Same sunset
over
three
and
times.
over and what are those movies that just have like the same day repeating but from different perspectives? This is basically just that, but Tolkien made it a sunset.
For a minute, I thought you were talking Groundhog Day, but no, you're talking about same day but different perspectives, right?
Yeah, different perspectives from all of that. Yeah. So the town and the whole region really is just absolutely deserted. So many had already gone to war in Minas Tirith, but also to fight the Corsairs. Right. The rest had just run away, as they probably should. Yeah, as you do with all of this.
That's right. Now, the next day comes, and this is March 10th, and it is, of course, the Dawnless Day. And the dead follow Aragorn and his people into the Storm of Mordor.
And we will not see them for quite some time.
That's true.
I imagine in podcast time, it is going to be several months probably for you.
We'll see them come back, halfway through the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. So we're talking about April or so, I think. Maybe May. I think we might be recording those in April. That's when Sean Marchese will actually be back. Yeah, he wouldn't let anybody take the Eowyn versus the Witch King moment, as he should, right?
That is his and his alone, if he wants it.
Well, many men had gone away to war, and the rest fled to the hills at the rumor of the coming of Barlaman. So what does Barlaman have in the back for us tonight, Don? At the rumor of the coming of the king of the mailbag.
You and your segues, Alan. All right. Well, Ellen R. writes in, listening to the Tolkien Reading Day episode on mysterious places. That would be the Tolkien Reading Day of, I believe, 2019. So episode 118. So sorry for the delay, Ellen. She continues, I have a Paths of the Dead question. How appropriate. We're on the Paths of the Dead chapter. When the dead have fulfilled their oath and depart in peace, do you think the paths are now safe to travel on? They would no longer be haunted, and if there is nothing or no one to guard them, a brave soul may be able to traverse them and find out what is behind that door and the other mysteries. Thoughts, speculation? Alan, your thoughts. What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't exactly want to move into the caves that have been haunted for over 3,000 years. That's quite a fixer-upper. But with the Oathbreakers now safely outside the circles of the world as they've fulfilled their oath, the paths should be, in theory, safe from any supernatural threats. But I do think there's another possibility we have to consider. What if, just what if, a handful of the Oathbreakers chose not to follow Aragorn's summons?
Ooh.
What if they're so ticked off at Isildur that they've decided they'd rather be ghosts for all eternity than ever do anything for that guy, right? I mean, Look, the theory is somewhat inspired by something you encounter in Lotro, Lord of the Rings Online, which
that's right. I forgot about this.
Some of the dead men of Dunharrow refused to follow Aragorn. They reaffirmed their allegiance to Sauron, and I think they're called the Ruthless Dead in game. It's an interesting what if, and you got to wonder, would they have the ability to turn down the summons? If they have the ability, might there not be a few who would, out of bitterness, stay behind?
Oh, look, that's a very long time to hold a grudge. Sure, there aren't any ghost therapists there to talk them through their anger and their hurt and their, worship of Sauron. But it's funny, before you introduced the Lord of the Rings Online, the Ruthless Dead, I probably would have said that I wouldn't go there anyway because there's probably some sort of Sauron-related magic there.
Oh, yeah.
Where they,
that temple that Baldur was...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what is behind Baldur's door?
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, if it's an evil temple to Sauron, you're right. I'm not going to want to be there.
Don't want to talk about it.
No.
Don't want to talk about it at all. Like it's
still going to be creepy as heck. Yeah.
Yeah. But do we ever find out what is behind Baldur's door?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Just that speculation that, we don't find out what actually is behind the door. We find out what Tolkien says is probably behind it. And we talked about that earlier tonight, right? So it's a perfect chance to just bring that phrase back in. So going back to the rivers and beacon hills of Gondor, Ellen, here's the reminder of what that says. The men of darkness built temples, some of great size, usually surrounded by dark trees, often in caverns, natural or delved, in secret valleys of mountain regions, such as the dreadful halls and passages under the haunted mountain beyond the dark door, the gate of the dead in Dunharrow. I feel weird like reading the same passage that we read earlier, but it's so relevant to answer this question. You really have to, because Tolkien goes on to say that the special horror of the closed door before which the skeleton of Baldur was found was probably due to the fact that the door was the entrance to an evil temple hall to which Baldur had come.
Oof. That's rough.
So if it is indeed that, then even without the Oathbreakers around,
still pretty bad. Hang out. Yeah. Still a pretty bad place. Don't want anything to do with it. I feel like that door ought to remain closed. Like
just
who knows?
Concrete that thing up.
Yeah. Block it up. Put some stones in there. In fact, maybe don't pass the mountains. Make an entirely new one.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah. Hire some dwarves. Just be like, hey, that one's closed. Do you mind? Just
it's under construction for the rest of time.
Forever. Yeah.
Forever.
All right. Alan, do we have time for one more or?
No, arguably we do have time, but the fact of the matter is I didn't pull a second question for this because I expected this would actually run long. So we'll just throw in an extra one in the next time if we can.
Fair enough.
All right, folks, that is all we have this week, folks. It wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But be sure to join us next week when we conclude Don's time at the PPP with extended public humiliation, also known as our 21st Questions After Nightfall.
You could never humiliate me if you tried. Folks, Alan and I do want to thank the members of Team PPP, editor Jordan Rannells, Barleyman Becca Davis, and our team of research assistants, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
And speaking of the website, please do be sure to give us a visit there at theprancingponypodcast.com. We've got show notes. We have some really hilarious outtakes, Prancing Pony ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get all sorts of PPP merch.
You'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, first and foremost, a podcast about the book. So if you are interested in the book that we've mentioned in the show, you'll find a link for it in our library. The PPP gets a small amount of compensation when you make your purchase, and we do thank you for that.
Indeed we do. We also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Jerry in Texas, Mario in Utah, B in California, Joseph in Texas, Kathy from North Carolina, Lori from Washington, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Ned from Connecticut, Jerry from Washington, and Joe in Washington.
There's also Erwin from the Netherlands, Dylan in Australia, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Karen in the UK, Zachsu in Illinois, Jim in Maryland, Brian in Texas, Sarah in New Jersey, June in Ireland, Joshua in Massachusetts, James in Florida, Lucy in Texas, Connor in North Carolina, Keith in Alabama, Carson in Oklahoma, Vivian in California, and James in Massachusetts. Thank you all so much for your support.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony podcast. Subscribe now through Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
One last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your stories for the evil temple hall behind Baldor's door to barnabin@theprancingponypodcast.com. Now, if you want your voice literally heard, well, just send us audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us.
Please be sure, though, to still email the question to Barleyman, and even though Barleyman's been a lot more reliable lately, there is still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able.
As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners, but until next time.
I have been Don Marshall, and before I wrap up, I realize I have one more episode, but I do just want to give a very special thanks to Alan. I've been listening to this podcast as a listener for a while, and to be invited on it as a host has been an absolute joy. I know there are plenty of old man jokes and doppelganger jokes and fun that we may have, but please know this has been an absolute joy and a pleasure to be on this podcast with you.
Oh, Don, thank you so much. That means the world to me, man. Really enjoyed it. All right, folks, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.